My next guest is finally going to be back in action coming up here at UFC Fight Night on November 28th. It is Ashlee Evans-Smith back here on the program. Ashlee, how's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Great to catch up with you. Today is Saturday at the time we're recording this. What does a typical Saturday look like for you? Is that a rest day, or do you, get in some training as well?
It's kind of a rest day. It's kind of both. So especially this close to the fight, there's not a complete rest day because we're always cutting weight. So we've got to keep the cardio and the road work going and active recovery. So even if it's, rolling out, stretching, that kind of stuff, and then just kind of going through the motions of going over the game plan, lots of jujitsu and kind of light work on Saturdays, and usually end the day with the fights.
Yes, absolutely, which is always nice. We got a great card coming up tonight. We'll talk about that in a sec. But February 2019, that's the last time we saw you in the cage. I know there's been some injuries. I know we had COVID as well. When were you looking to fight, like ideally? Because I know obviously everything got bumped back with COVID-19.
Yeah, unfortunately, the last fight was last February, so over a year. And then I was lined up to fight in March. And then COVID took me out of that. We made it to London and then had to fly home. And then we wanted to get back in right when they started putting on the cards, but I had some injuries that I had to overcome during the pandemic, as well as all the gyms closing, because I'm here in California. So it was very, how California is, we were shut down a lot. So we had to make the decision to kind of just make sure we had the best camp possible. And so, it took a long time. It took a really long time. And I can't believe that it's been this long. So I feel like it was just the other day that we were preparing for Molly McCann for the 125-pound division. And then here I am in November fighting Norma Dumont in the 135-pound division. So just so much has happened since then.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Is this like a permanent move back up, or is it just because this was the only fight that you could get? Because I know for a lot of fighters, it's like you got to take what you can get at whatever weight class, right?
Yeah, no, actually they offered me originally a fight at 125, but again, it wasn't that we didn't want to fight that person. It was that I consider myself to be very professional in the sense that your first job is to make weight. Right. And with all the gyms being closed, I didn't want to commit to something if I was unsure, because I cut a significant amount of weight for flyweight. I used to fight at 45, then 35, and then 25. So we didn't say no, but we said we needed more time. And then after that, they said, well, how about this fighter who was a bantamweight? And we said, for sure. And we even had to push back Norma originally because we were overcoming some of injuries. So like I said, just like the weight situation and injuries and the gyms being closed, but finally we're here, we're ready to fight. And to answer your question, I don't know. I think that bantamweight feels amazing compared to flyweight as opposed to being able to eat. But when I'm at flyweight, it's like I'm the leanest, I'm the fastest, most agile version of myself. It just takes a lot of suffering to get there. Mm-hmm. So I'm not opposed to going back to it. But for now, during the pandemic with all the ups and downs, California's talking about another closure, and so bantamweight for now.
No, and totally understandable. That was going to be one of my questions, actually, is with training. I know everything's sort of on lockdown right now in California. It's a bummer because there's so many good gyms there. And I know they have to be obviously mindful of, the safety protocols, and the government's telling them, hey, certain gyms got to close down or whatever, right? So you're dealing with a lot outside the cage, not just, your typical, layoff heading into a fight like this. So yeah, that's good. You've sort of made the most of it, like you were mentioning. Sort of last thing on sort of the layoff. I know when you don't fight financially, it's obviously very tough to get through. How have you been able to manage that, as whether it's, savings or sponsors? How have you been able to sort of keep the lights on, pay the bills and all that with not fighting for so long?
Yeah, you really have to be creative. And I feel fortunate that I'm a pretty good networker. I actually work for Sucker Punch Entertainment, which is cool. Yeah. So, Brian Butler is my manager, but they brought me on actually during the pandemic to help out with sponsorships, just because, like I said, I'm a decent networker, and I've been in the game long enough that I know how to negotiate, but I'm not over here doing huge contracts, but I can get a little bit of money here and there, and that's basically what I've done, whether it was someone like Zebra Mats who saved my ass. They matted out my entire garage. So shout out to Zebra Mats, 10 feet away. I can roll, I can stretch, I can do whatever I want during the pandemic if the gyms do close down. It's not ideal, but it's a great backup plan to have. And then other companies like Trifecta who gave me food. And for a minute there, it was like, thank you, Trifecta,
Right.
because pinching pennies during this quarantine has been crucial. And, I'm not fighting for the money because we would have taken the fight at 125 and, tried to cut the weight, but I'm fighting because I'm finally ready. And yes, the money is very necessary, but I think, tons of people have said it, you should never fight just for money. Bad things happens when you fight just for money.
No. Yeah, that's
so
great.
yeah, so just little sponsorships here and there, pinching pennies. I'm very unmaterialistic. Is that how non-materialistic?
Yeah, you're not materialistic. I know what you mean. Yeah.
So I'm not like big into shopping. Like my biggest luxury, I guess you would say, would just be going out to eat food. And just since the restaurants were closed, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not going out to eat food. So,
Right.
I don't drink anymore, which is a good thing for a lot of reasons. And then I'll save some money, not drinking. So it's been rough, but at the same time, I come from a background of not having any money. So it was just kind of like, buckle down and do what I'm used to, be frugal.
Yeah, no, that's great. And shout out to Brian Butler for giving you that opportunity as well to work with the management group. I know there's other fighters like, Dan Ige, for example, I know works for Ali at Dominance. So it's cool that you've been able to, get in some other income doing some stuff that it's at least is fight related, right? It's not like you're having to go work in an office or something that has nothing to do with the sport. So I think that's really cool. You mentioned something there about not drinking. Congrats. I mean, that's, obviously I know for different people, it's different as well. How long have you gone without having alcohol? I think that's great.
So it's a year and 4 months.
Wow. Nice. Good for you.
Someone like me, I'm like, it's pretty long time. And it's a commitment now. It's not just like taking a break. It's kind of silly, when you're a professional athlete and you drink as much as I was, you would think that you would come to that conclusion earlier, but when you're that big of a drinker, you focus on all the reasons why you should keep drinking as opposed to the reasons why you should stop drinking. But came to my senses, pulled my head out of my ass, for lack of a better, term. And nothing has been harder, but nothing has been as beneficial to my career. So even though we have the pandemic and financial problems and this, Norma Dumont is, big girl and she's, aggressive and I'm not taking her lightly. At the same time, I've never had this kind of confidence going into a fight because I'm finally the best version of myself.
Yeah, no, that's great. Props to you. I know I can't drink that much anymore. I'm getting older. Like the hangovers are just terrible. Like I can't do it. It like takes me out for a day and it's just like, that's a day I could be working. Right. So good on you for that. So yeah, we talked about your opponent, Norma Dumont, 4-1 record. What do you know about her? How do you feel like you match up against her here?
So there's not too much that we know about her in the sense that she doesn't have that many fights, and the fights that she did have were in Brazil. There's not a lot of footage on it. We do have her fight against Megan Anderson, which wasn't a very long fight. And, you could say like, oh, she got knocked out, but that can happen to anybody. So like I said before, we're not taking her lightly, but at the same time, I feel like it's a very, very good fight for me. I've been the bigger girl before, so even when I was dropping down to flyweight, it wasn't about me being the bigger girl. It was about me being the best version of myself, being, leaner and faster and able to move better. And now with Norma, since I've kind of been in the flyweight division and worked on my footwork and my speed and boxing skills and all that, I'm going to take that as a bigger version of Ashlee into my fight against Norma. And so I just feel it's a really good matchup. I feel like I have that speed and agility of a flyweight now, but I get to put on a little bit of weight and fight a bigger girl. And I'm used to being a bigger girl, so it's not a big deal. If she wants to wrestle, I feel like my wrestling is most definitely superior to hers. She's going to be very powerful, but again, our goal is to use my footwork and speed and agility to, you know, not get drawn into that just slugfest. And, you know, I like a slugfest more, you know, just as much as anybody does, but I'm just a different fighter now. If you look at some of my past fights, even before the UFC and in the early UFC stages, it was, you know, just go out there and fight. And now I go out there and fight, but there's a lot more thought process and game planning and, you know, just higher fight IQ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's we've definitely seen that over the last couple of fights. So it's excited to see what you can bring to the table on the 28th. You talked a bit about some of the injuries you had. Like what specifically did you have? And like, you know, I imagine there was a period where you're like, okay, I can finally go back to training full time. Like when did that take place as well? That's kind of a two-part question there, but you're a vet. You got a podcast. You know what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing with anything before war, you're not going to tell the masses or your opponent, you know.
Of course. Yeah, exactly what happened. Yeah.
So yeah. I'll just say this. I'll say we never go into fights 100%. Mm-hmm. We all know that, especially if you've been in the cage, you know that. But we also know that most fights, you know, since most fighters are injured, but they still win, what does that say? It means that as long as you have a good mentality and a good, you know, your confidence level is high, anything is possible. So yeah, I've had some setbacks and, you know, injuries were a bummer. You know, maybe she's got her own injuries. I don't know. But at the end of the day, all that matters is that I'm going in there with 100% confidence, knowing that I'm going to win this fight. And I think we'll see the results, regardless of what I got going on physically.
Who have you had a chance to work with? You talked about sort of training at home. Are you getting in, you know, any bodies and, you know, getting to work with at your house, or like how's camp gone? That's kind of what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, camp has been weird. At first it was like, oh, it's going to be a garage camp. And then gyms started to open up. And then I had a change in Muay Thai camps. And so, you know, with a new coach, you are always, there's that feeling out process where you're trying to get that chemistry and that rhythm and all that. And I was nervous because we'd only been working for a couple, you know, it's been a few months now, which is good. And that's Yoshi Hikasaka. He's at the Yard, Joe Schilling's gym in LA. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's weird because even though I'm a little nervous, it's my first time having him in my corner. It's also great knowing that if my opponent was training for me, the former fighter, I'm just not that fighter anymore. And there's no video on, you know, what I've been training. You know, they have no idea what I'm bringing to the table because I have this completely different coach with a new style. So that's exciting, different, you know, kind of nerve-wracking at the same time. And then I've been just busting my butt like normal as far as running and lifting and grappling and drilling, and Black House MMA is amazing. My wrestling coach, Kenny Johnson, he's a busy man. He's doing seminars, traveling all over, but he always makes time for me to work on the things that are going to win me the fight. And then my boyfriend, Mike Wilson, is, you know, I live with him and we got our mats 10 feet away. So there's no reason I can't do jujitsu. And, you know, it's just, this camp has been about adapting. You know, just because we don't go to the gym, you know, at the same time or the same location doesn't mean I haven't been working just as hard, if not harder.
Excellent. Well, that sounds good. You're kind of customizing it to what works best for you. And like you said, with the coaching and getting to train at home, I think that's a lot of fighters are having to do that anyways, because they don't have the luxury of going to like a regular gym or doing like the normal stuff. So that's good. In terms of the weight cut, you sort of talked about it there, you know, no alcohol. And then obviously you're getting the meals as well. So I imagine the cut's going pretty well, especially not having to cut those extra, you know, 10 pounds to get down to flyweight.
Yeah. The cut is always the cut, you know, it's
right. Okay. I like the honesty.
And it's never easy. Some cuts are easier than others, obviously. I'm actually really bummed I didn't get to make weight for that Molly McCann fight in London, because we landed fight week the lowest I had ever been for 125. And so, you know, I'm just really proud of myself because it feels like every fight I get smarter and I learn more about my body. One thing I did during this pandemic was I got a complete blood panel of all my hormones, you know, nutrients and adrenals, like everything you can test for. Tested it. And so now I'm just like tip top shape, you know, with all my supplementation, the diet's on point. And I went so far as to purchase a in-home sauna. So,
Oh,
just,
awesome.
yeah. And, you walk into my living room and you're like, these are definitely athletes. I
Yeah,
live in a small one-bedroom apartment, but you got to do what you got to do, and it's going to pay off because it's cold here in California, and I got to make weight and whatever. So I justified it financially, and I got a deal on it. But yeah, it's just the weight cut is always the weight cut, but it's definitely nicer to not have to go down to flyweight.
for sure. By the way, what is considered cold in California? Because like I live in Vancouver. I'm actually not that far away from you in California in terms of like a flight. I think it's only like a 2-hour flight, but like we're cold now. I definitely have to wear like a winter jacket right now because it is getting kind of cold here. But what do you is it like a light jacket in California? Is that would be considered cold? I'm curious.
Okay, I'm looking at my phone right now, and okay, right now it's 50 degrees, but this
Okay.
morning it had to have been in the 40s, and like
Okay. Okay. So not
that
shorts
was
weather.
like,
Like you need to wear some pants, right?
oh, I was wearing spandex, sweats, Fugs, the Ugg boots, a
Yeah, of course.
sweater
Yeah.
and little gloves because I'm
Okay,
just,
fair enough. I thought you were like, because it's California, right? So people are like, it's cold, and I'm like, well, what does that really mean to the rest of us, right? Because it's obviously
well,
like a
let's
lot
be
colder
honest,
elsewhere. Yeah.
I'm spoiled. I'm a big old baby. I got to give a seminar in Illinois on December 12th,
Oh yeah, you
and
got to really
like
layer up for that one.
I'm dreading it. I'm just like, yeah, it's gonna
They
suck.
should include like winter clothing like in that contract if you're going to go teach a seminar. It's like, don't worry, we got you covered with all the, we call them
Yeah.
toques here. You call them beanies in the US, right? The thing you wear on your head.
Oh, what do you call them?
We call them toques here in Canada.
Never heard of that.
Listen, you're
I
getting
know.
something extra in these interviews, Ashley, when you do them with me, because you learn all the Canadian stuff. So there you go. Yeah, we call them toques. So there you go.
Okay.
So there you go. Learn something
The
there.
Australians call sweatshirts jumpers,
Oh,
and I
do they?
thought that was,
Oh, I've
yeah,
never
like,
heard
oh,
that
don't
either.
forget your jumper. I'm like, my jumper, like your sweatshirt,
Okay,
yeah.
interesting. There you go.
And-
So you talked about Yoshi being in your corner. Is Mike going to be in your corner as well? Like, who's going to be in the cage with you that night?
yeah, so it will be Yoshi, it'll be Mike Wilson, and it will be Kenny Johnson from Black
Oh,
House.
awesome. Okay, good.
Yeah, and I would have loved to have my boxing coach Chewy Gutierrez in my corner. I love him. If you've ever met him, this guy is like a ray of sunshine. He's just like the happiest go lucky guy. And I actually asked my manager, Brian Butler, I said, can we please bring him fight week? He's just really good energy. And just with all these COVID procedures, they said no. And I'm like, oh, but yeah, he'll be back in my corner most likely the next fight. It was just, given some injuries, I
Mhm.
worked more with Yoshi than I did with Chewy. And so it just made more sense.
Yeah, no, good call on that. How do you feel like the fight's going to play out on November 28th? You feel like you're going to get your hand raised, but how do you envision it playing out?
So I have this whole game plan,
Mhm.
and we all know that the game plan can go out the window, but I think that it's going to be a dominant performance in the sense that I don't think it's going to go all 3 rounds. I think either I stop her on the feet, or it's going to be some grappling, ground and pound.
Mhm.
I'm coming in there the most level-headed, but the most hungry I have ever been. I mean, I've had a year layoff, unfortunately. I think it was like back in 2014. I didn't fight for a year after that. That sucked. But this is longer, and there's always more on the line. Every fight, more on the line, more on the line,
Mhm.
right? And you either take that pressure and you crumble, or you take that pressure and you fight the best you have ever fought. And that's what I'm gonna do.
Before we go, got to talk about your podcast, Sex and Violence with Rebel Girl. The one thing I love about this podcast that you do is that you get sort of the personal side of fighters, which we don't, you don't really get that unless like a fighter goes on with Joe Rogan or like, the typical interviews, like what I do or Ariel or anyone, right? You're not getting that side of them. Whereas you kind of get, the person as opposed to the fighter. And I even remember a couple of years ago when we were doing interviews, you were doing sort of the in-person video interviews, but I almost think this is better because you get that time to, there's no time limit. You can kind of just go on, talk about a variety of different topics. So my first question is, how's it going? Because you mentioned 26 episodes deep, but it seems like it's going pretty strong.
Yeah, I started it. I had the idea last November, ran it by a couple friends. Everybody was like, I would listen to that. That's a great idea. And, tinkered around, life hit. And then the pandemic. I mean, a lot of crap has the pandemic has really affected everybody's life in a negative way, but some good things have come from it. And one great thing that's come from the pandemic situation for myself is the podcast. And I've had so much time. Now I'm a little pressed. Now I'm in fight camp and I'm like still doing the podcast because I want to remain consistent for the listeners. But at the same time, I can't neglect fighting because that's number one. But previous months I had so much time, so I just spent networking and getting good guests and creating these good questions and diving into the parts of the athletes' lives, like you said, that aren't touched upon and no one gets to listen to. So it's been so awesome. It's going really, really well. We have guests that talk about, you know, something kind of silly, you know, very lighthearted, all the way to people like Heather Hardy, who is, you know, former boxer, now Bellator MMA fighter, or Ilima McFarland, the Bellator 125-pound MMA champ. These girls who had sexual abuse situations happen to them, and they're speaking out about it. And so they're like, you know, they're heavy, but they have substance, and there's something that people should hear about, and maybe even will become inspired and motivated by, and you know, help them later in life. So I know it's big shoes to fill, or it's something maybe a little cocky to say, but I like to say it's a mix between Joe Rogan and Howard Stern. So where you're getting like, you know, some fight details about these athletes, but then every once in a while we'll have an adult entertainer. You know, we had Pauly Shore, you know, we're having a dominatrix on next week. So it's just like, what's she going to bring to the table next? And I've had really good feedback. I've had quite a few people say no, because it is called sex and violence, and not everyone's comfortable talking about their sexual behaviors and experiences, and that's okay, you know. Yeah.
No, but all the power to you, because I think, you know, there might be people who want to talk about that stuff, or they're not worried about the PC culture and all that. And I think you're probably inspiring other people who might not want to talk about that stuff, but because you're touching on it, it kind of makes them feel comfortable. So, you know, I don't know if that's something you've thought of, but I think that's kind of cool, because no one's doing this in MMA right now, if you think about it, right? Or combat sports even, because I know you get, like you said, you got Heather on. Well, I guess Heather does both, but you get what I'm saying there, which is really cool.
It's about normalizing sexuality and normalizing, you know, the things that we do that are okay, or the things that we go through, but society says don't talk about them. When the thing that I tell everybody before we do the podcast, my favorite phrase or quote that got me inspired to do the podcast, shame dies when stories are told in safe places. So think about all the times you were feeling insecure about something, and then you heard someone, maybe in an interview like this with James Lynch, and you thought to yourself, wow, I went through that same thing, and look how this person overcame it. I remember personally AJ Matthews talking about how he got sober in an interview. I forget who did the interview, but I remember thinking to myself, that guy is strong, that guy is cool. I wish I could do that. And then fast forward however many years it took me to pull my head out of my ass, and here I am. But it's the same thing. I hope that someone listens to my podcast, they laugh, because everybody needs a laugh right now, and they get inspired in some kind of way.
Yeah, no, I think that's really awesome what you're doing. Is there a guest that you want on your show that you haven't had a chance to get yet? Like, is there that bucket list yet of guests that you want on?
Yeah, there is, for sure. We don't have too many males, and we have had some, you know, Alex Hernandez, who is hilarious.
He's awesome. Yeah, great personality.
You know, yeah, great fighter, great personality, shared some great stories. And then I'm getting some more males, but I think someone who would just kind of just be hilarious and very open would be someone like Colby Covington. You know, he just rubs people the right way, or he rubs people the wrong way, but regardless, you want to listen to him talk, right?
No, I agree. I agree.
Someone like him, but you know, there's no ideal guest, you know, because sometimes someone's going to listen to Tracy Cortez and, you know, that's going to resonate with them. Or sometimes, you know, they're going to listen to an Alex Hernandez and they're going to be like, oh, I want to be just like Alex, or that's hilarious. He made me feel good about whatever I have going on. So.
Excellent. My last question I had to ask is, when are you going on Beauty and the Beast, their podcast, Kendra and Julian Marquez? Because I know you follow their show, and they sort of tackle similar topics, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I had Kendra on before she had her podcast. It was like, I don't know what episode, like maybe in the single digits or something like that. And she told me she was about to start a podcast with Julian Marquez, and they're doing video, which I'm not, you know, I have my producer kind of record and then later add sound bites, but like we're not doing Zoom, we're not doing anything like that. We will graduate to that eventually, but I know that they are, so props to them for that. I don't know, they haven't asked me to be on the podcast, but if they did, I would do it in a heartbeat, because I don't know.
I'll put in a good word. I put in a good word. I know those guys. I know Julian and Kendra quite well. So yeah, there you go. I was just curious because you guys have similar podcasts. I figured like it would be cool to see even Julian on your show and then vice versa, you going on theirs, because I think again they tackle everything. They had a really good interview a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you saw it, with Brian Ortega, which was just awesome to see Brian open up like that, because I know it's tough to get him to sort of bring that side out of him. So
well, I asked Brian Ortega and he said he did not want to put his personal life on blast, so that's unfortunate.
He didn't go into detail about dating stuff, but he talked about like obviously the struggles of being off for 2 years and then coming back and stuff. And that's not something I think he'd give every sort of journalist, but I think with Kendra and Julian, because it's a bit more laid back, I think they were a bit more there. It could be, it could be a process, right? But anyways, just throwing that out there. Anyways, we went way over time in this interview, Ashlee. I really appreciate the time. I always enjoy talking to you. Just remind people where they can find you on social media, where they can find your podcast, and if you got any sponsors or shout outs you want to give, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you. All social media accounts is just at Ashlee MMA, ASHLEE MMA. My podcast, if you want to follow the podcast on Instagram, it's at Sex and Violence with Rebel Girl, all spelled out. And then we're available on all platforms: Spotify, iTunes, Podchaser, Podbean, all of them. And then sponsors are MRM Nutrition, Trifecta, my management company, Sucker Punch is amazing with Brian Butler. I'm probably forgetting some sponsors right now.
But you post them on your social media, so that's where they can follow you and they'll see all those sponsors, right?
Yeah, but I really have to give a huge shout out to Rock LA and Dr. Kessler, OC Fight Docs here, because without them, I wouldn't be taking this fight. Like I said, we never go into camps 100%, but they have really, fine-tuned me, all the little kinks, and I'm ready to go because of Rock LA and OC Fight Docs.